minutes ago now, yeah.
Okay. Well, I suppose, which I have said before, and it could be relevant to what you've seen on the EIT website. I was lucky enough to be brought up in a creative family where my grandfather, my mother's father, as much as he was a businessman, he was very passionate about his hobbies, which, you know, I don't think he actually ever mentioned or called them a hobby, but his kind of what he was passionate about, and that was both drawing, model making, and calligraphy. So he was one of these people who had mastered copperplate with the old fountain pens before I suppose the mainstream printing was there, but you know, we're high-end kind of invitations in his generation were all handmade as opposed to printed, you know, so that he had a little bit of a sideline going and doing copperplate invitations for high-end events. My earliest memories were of sitting beside him trying to draw like he would. As well as that, he loved parody, so he was a comic artist as much as he was a drawer of fine realism. And many a time I can remember, because I was born in Chicago, going to the port down in Bluff and him drawing the rigging on ships, or an element of ships, and I'd be sitting there beside him trying to do all the drawing. So consequently, I'd had art in my life, and as well as that, he would then take these drawings of a lot of these kind of really hyper-real details and then make them in 3 dimensions. And he would make them with whatever he could find. It wasn't, I'm going to buy that kit set and make it a kit set. He just used to make things from his drawings. So there was so we had a whole backyard that we would empty out of his studio of ships if he would let us. Some of them you weren't allowed to touch, but a lot of them you were allowed to play with, and that's obviously we destroyed them, you know, but you know, that's a part of being a child. So I kind of got used to the idea of making stuff to play with. So all my life, whenever we wanted to make something to play with, or wanted something to play with, I'd make it, as it were, that kind of thing. The problem was, which I never actually knew until later in life, is that in my first year of schooling, I'm a left-hander, and in my first year of schooling, there was still a preoccupation in education to dissuade children from using their left hand to write, and I was repeatedly hit by a teacher. My mother had an ongoing war with her for about the first 6-9 months of my school life to try and stop her repeatedly hitting me. And of course, my reaction to it wasn't to, I suppose it caused definitely problems. I think the biggest problem was that I thought, well, if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to do something back to you. So I started battling with her and then all subsequent teachers in primary school for control of the classroom. As I said, well, you're going to control me, so I'm going to control you back. I'm going to control the environment. And it became a real issue right getting up towards the end of primary school, where I would basically, if I didn't like the teacher and they didn't for whatever reason, I'd just start trying to get all the other students in the class to listen to me and not the teacher. Then at that point, we moved here to the Hawke's Bay. And suddenly I was in an environment where no one knew me, no one cared. And I was on the cusp of being held back in school. And for me at that point in time, it was probably the epitome of being stupid. So, I mean, all of these things kind of contributed to the person I am, and I was, is that I had no idea until the last 15, 20 years that this even occurred. Because it happened when I was 5 years old, you don't consciously remember, oh, I got hit, so that's how I am. It was all instinct that drives you as a little child. But what it did is it changed the whole direction of my life. as opposed to the possible outcomes that I could have had, given that I had stunted my education to such a degree. It went in a different direction, which now, where I am in my life, I'm really grateful for, which is really weird to say that, because I know my character, and I know that if that hadn't have happened, I would have gone a lot further, but I think I would have been a more autocratic type of character, and I wouldn't have had such a kind of, what's they call it, a divergent type of way of looking at things, which now, where I am in my life, I think is a huge value. For me personally, first and foremost, and second, for the job that I've ended up in art education, tertiary art education. And so, rolling it on to the end of my school, I managed to avoid being held back, because that was a complete shock to my ability, because even though I was within the school system considered low intelligence, I never considered myself to be low intelligence at all. And I was always of the belief that you can, and I still believe that, you can do anything you really want to if you put your mind to it. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard work, but you can do anything. And, and probably actually you're in luckily enough, and I don't think a lot of people know this until they actually go out into the world, that this is one of the few countries that I still believe that anyone can become the Prime Minister, for an example. A lot of countries, it's all on background. If you don't come from a privileged background, you haven't got any hope of getting into a position of power in a society. Here, you still can. So I think that's a huge advantage for anyone that aspires to whatever. It kind of opens up the playing field. Getting towards the end of my schooling, because of everything that happened during my schooling, and my expectations necessarily had to change because of where I was an education level, I couldn't get into art school because I wasn't of the academic level required. At that point, there weren't the number of schools doing an art course or design course. If my memory serves me, when I left school, it was like Otago, Wellington, I think it was Vic, and then Ilam in Christchurch and Elam in Auckland, and that was it. And because there were so few schools, and there weren't any of the polytechnic schools there are now, only those that were highly artistic and highly academic could get into them. I didn't have a chance, so I didn't even try. So I went off on another tangent out into the world. Still doing my creative practices, mainly drawing. Had been done all my life. I got into printing for the first time when I was living in Auckland with the Auckland Art Society, and was fortunate enough to actually be taught by Carol Shepherd, who's a very accomplished printer. I really enjoyed that, and a number of other tutors, and then moved to London and joined up with a printing kind of collaborative community in Kentish Town in North London, and carried it on there. And it wasn't until I came back from my overseas travels and didn't actually get straight back into working. Actually, I was doing a whole lot of different kind of part-time jobs and doing these music events, and the kind of burnt that out after about 3 or 4 years, and I was lucky enough in a position where I hadn't got a job, and it was either get a job or go to art school. And that was 1999, and I made the decision to come here. And so I did a level 4 diploma, a 3-year degree here, and then I went on and did a 2-year masters at Elam in Auckland. I applied for both Elam and AUT and got accepted to both of them. And I picked Elam mainly because of its history. And actually, after having had the experience of being there for 2 years, probably made the wrong decision. I should have gone to AUT, because I remember talking to one of the tutors that came down here to do some post-moderation, and actually got on really well with her. I can't remember what her name was. She was the theorist up there that did a lot of post-grad work, and probably should have gone there, but history is as history is. I went to Elam and did 2 years there, and I got the masters. I got more importantly for me than the masters, though, as much as that's helped me in tertiary art education, is I got 2 more years of my practice without having to, worry too much about income. And that at that point, after doing a degree, the most important thing for me personally at that point was to carry on a practice that was just starting to open up and kind of get some coherence on it. So that's kind of my education up to the kind of present point in time. When I left school, because I couldn't do the fine arts, I just went out into jobs, and I did a whole lot of jobs up until actually working at Idea School when I started teaching here 2003, 2004. Previous to that, all of the jobs I'd ever held had only been a maximum of 5 years because I got bored. So I just kept jumping. And it was because most jobs stay the same. You're in a job and you go into that job environment, you're with a group of people. Sure, people come and go, but generally you master the job, the people stay the same. The big difference with being a teacher, which really appealed to me, and I'm an extrovert, have no problem communicating with people. In fact, I really enjoy, as much as I can spend heaps of time on my own, I really enjoy communication. It's not a problem. But the difference with being a teacher is you get this constant stream of predominantly young minds coming through, and it's a two-way street, like the Māori tuakana taina principle. Teaching is a two-way street. It's not just you're teaching them, they're teaching you, they're giving you energy, and there's just nothing like a room full of young people to keep you in touch with the youthful side of yourself. And I've never had anything remotely like it in my life, and it's a bedrock part of the foundations of why I really like teaching. And it's married to something I've been doing since I was a wee child, which is art. So it's natural, it's a natural kind of thing. It's easy. I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't get out of bed, as you were saying just before, with your, with that lunar cycle. And some days you've got high energy, and other days you've got less energy. It's still a challenge when you haven't got much energy, kind of thing. That's the way it is. But that's kind of why I got into it, kind of thing. And I haven't now got the next question.
Let's grab that.
Awesome, mate. Okay. So I think I've done the first bullet point. Could you tell me about why you decided to pursue a career in creative practice education and or as an artist designer? I suppose you just follow your own muse. Well, for me it was innate. I knew what I liked doing. I was, as much as I was intrigued by design, and definitely felt an affinity with the act of creating anything, be it art or design. Probably the less encumbered need, and this is my own words, of an external entity having a need for an outcome. The need was only my own. And that's one of the reasons that I went into fine arts as opposed to design, because it just basically, the only need was to fulfill my own needs. So that was probably the reason I went into fine arts as opposed to anything else, that kind of thing. Drawing, because I've been doing it all my life in my own ways, not a problem. But I really, it was at Idea School that I discovered 3D, sculpture. So, and that really was because of the workshops here. So got these great workshops, and first as a student, then as a technician, then as a tutor, both fulfilling my own journey in making as much as facilitating the journey of the students. It suddenly opens up a huge world when you've got access to technology, no matter what the technology is relative to what your needs are. or your desire kind of thing. And it was being here that opened it all up, all of the possibilities of sculpture, and I just reveled in it. And it's amazing. It's been all over the place since finding 3D. I've kind of played with wood, with metal, with sculpture, different types of sculpture, inside sculpture, outside sculpture, site specific. There was a period for about 4 years where I was doing stage set design, mainly for kind of amateur production places in the Bay, but then did branch out and did a couple down in Wellington. I did one actually for a postgrad student at Tuifakato down in Wellington, which is a real eye-opener and a real experience. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And then now, through a lot of different, and then back into just sculpture, following my own muse with regards to the research direction that I was taking at any one time. It seems to have always been pretty consistent. The main thing that influenced me is probably, to put one word on, is nature, the natural world. And you can get into specifics, but that kind of is an all-encompassing thing. The non-human made, though I mean we're making it, so I suppose I'm humanising it by doing it. And now it's come around to all of the stuff that I'm making is very small. It's got progressively smaller, and now it has a connection to the body. So that's probably the best way of describing it. Some people call it jewellery. I just call it sculpture that has a connection to the body in some way, shape, or form. So I suppose you could say that you're supposed to wear it. What else we got here? Yeah, I think that's about answers that kind of question. I think. Could you talk about why you decided to enroll in the creative art and design when you started this journey? I did. That kind of thing. I said why I got started because it was about kind of, I was lucky enough to have a family member, my grandfather. For a young child, the grandparents or parents of your parents, they have a heck of an influence on you. And he did. He was a hell of a charismatic character who died before his time because he was a cigarette smoker. I think he was somewhere around 60 or something like that, late 50s, 60s, and he just smoked too much and got him in the end cancer, lung cancer. And do I have a personal creative practice teaching philosophy? Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, that's a lifelong learning, for me as a teacher. I don't think that I ever came into teaching with, this is what I'm going to do and this is what they're going to do, the students. It's been a real lifelong learning. I suppose as a student yourself, you get some ideas of what you'd like to do and what you wouldn't like to do, kind of thing, and that's relative to everyone and specific to everyone and differences. But I still feel like I'm learning how to be a good teacher all the time with students. It's a real challenge, and I thoroughly enjoy it. This latest group in here, they're really interesting. They're all really intelligent. They all want to be creative. They're very communicable. No, that's not the right word. They're very collaborative. This generation, this young teenage generation at the moment, they work almost like a mass. They're not singular. They're almost like a very collaborative. And I know that actually doesn't explain what it is that I see in them, but it's like they work as though they're not singular. It's almost like a group entity. That's probably a better way of saying it. Like a group entity, and everything happens together, and that's obviously as a result of technology. In my generation, we never had cell phones at all. Now they have, so they're in constant contact with each other all of the time. There's this and it's, yeah. I remember watching my son grow up and kind of nosing in on how he was communicating, and my initial thought that it was really banal, because a lot of the stuff that they were saying didn't have a great deal of meaning. And then I thought to myself, well, that actually is exactly the same thing that I used to do as a teenager with my friends, but we just used to do it verbally as opposed through technology. So there was nothing that actually recorded it You know, at that point in time it was here and gone in a second because you just say it. But it was exactly the same thing. It just didn't have the interface of the cell phone, if you will. So there's no difference. No, it's just your Adobe InDesign.
Oh yeah,
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'll ignore it. Not that OCD. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I think it's fascinating. I mean, there is a constant. Every group dynamic has a need for a different interaction, and that's a big one. You know, for me, that's one of the things I'm learning more and more is you cannot act the same way with every group. It will not work because of the characters in there and that group mentality. You know, they're highly creative. They actually, if you don't say them, you get them in here, but there's actually if you don't say much, they all will make. They will all keep making, but you have to have some kind of structure that it's not as overtly apparent as, can you be quiet, that kind of stuff. Can you be quiet? Can you stop that? Can you do this? Can you not do that? A lot of it, you have to actually give them the rope to make some noise, to express themselves a bit, to push the boundary of acceptability a little bit. Because at the end of the day, we're asking them to be creative, and if you kind of use normal societal kind of measures on that, it kind of is a bit of an oxymoron. It doesn't work, the old idea of, so you're trying to get these people to be creative and come out of their shell a little bit with what they're actually doing. And so that's where the learning is for me, is what works, what doesn't. How far do you let them go before you say that's enough, that's too loud, that's too obscene in the language that you're using, etc., etc. So that's my learning constantly with them as a group, and never fails to amaze me how consistent they are at making. That they just keep doing it if you give them the right environment. Interesting. I think the big challenge is not the making at the moment. The big challenge is to get them to integrate a methodology of research with their practice. That's the big one. It's how do you approach that? How do you invigorate that? It's like tomorrow we're doing their very first, they've done a peer critique, done a self-critique and a peer critique in the last two projects. This one on tomorrow afternoon we're going to do a group critique in the room. And I've been talking to them ever since we started the project about this. They all thought it was yesterday, so they're all paranoid coming in yesterday. And I said, you're not actually looking at your timetable, it's actually tomorrow. Oh, okay. And I said, you need to keep reading your timetable. Anyhow, we're going to go through it, and they're all kind of, I can tell they're metaphorically hyperventilating because they think it's formal. And I keep saying, it's not formal, we're just going to talk about the work, And I've already posted a guide right at the beginning of the project. That's a really well written one. I think it's written by Michael Hawksworth, actually. It's really well written. And it's really confrontational, but it gives plenty of things that can kind of just invigorate dialogue, conversation about a piece of work. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll get going. Once they've got through the initial kind of reticence and kind of slight embarrassment by talking, they are definitely a group that have no trouble expressing themselves. So all I'm actually asking them to do is formalise their expressiveness, But they're already doing it the whole time, which I might even actually talk about before we start. So, hey, look, none of you actually have problems communicating. So, apart from we've got one, she's very quiet. But even she, when you get her to talk, is very erudite. So it's just formalising the thing. It's taking it slightly into a situation they're not used to. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.